Madison Clarke and her seemingly loyal best friend walked side by side through the halls of Willow Creek High, smiles on their faces, unaware that trust would soon turn into betrayal in the deadliest way imaginable. The morning air in Willow Creek carried a quiet stillness that contrasted sharply with the bustling energy that usually filled the small Texas town. Birds chirped softly, and the faint hum of distant traffic barely reached the neighborhoods tucked away behind rows of oaks and maples. Madison Clarke's house, a modest two-story with a well-kept lawn, appeared ordinary from the outside, but inside, a storm was about to unravel that would shake the community to its core. Madison was an 18-year-old cheerleader known for her bright smile, infectious laughter, and tireless energy. She had a presence that drew people in, a magnetic charm that made her the center of attention wherever she went. She was disciplined, balancing schoolwork, cheer practice, and part-time jobs with a maturity beyond her years. On that morning, she had planned a simple routine: wake up early, finish homework, and prepare for the weekend ahead. But when her mother called her for breakfast, there was no answer. The hours that followed were filled with growing anxiety. Initially, her absence was attributed to being caught up in her room or asleep after a late-night study session. But as the morning stretched into the afternoon, worry began to replace casual concern. Her mother, Patricia Clarke, knocked on her door repeatedly, each unanswered knock intensifying the unease. Patricia opened the door to find the room untouched, her daughter's belongings scattered in a way that suggested nothing unusual at first glance. But the subtle signs didn't go unnoticed. A backpack left open, a laptop still running, and the absence of Madison's phone, which she never left behind. Panic set in, and Patricia called 911. Police arrived quickly, their presence bringing a mixture of reassurance and dread. Officers began a methodical search of the house, checking every room with careful precision. It was when they entered the bathroom that they discovered Madison's body, floating face up in the bathtub. The water had cooled, creating a chilling contrast to the warmth and vibrancy she carried in life. The scene was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint dripping of water from the faucet. At first glance, it could have been dismissed as a tragic accident. However, trained eyes noticed subtle inconsistencies. A faint bruise on her wrist, smudges on the tile, and the unnatural angle of her body in the tub. These details suggested a struggle, a moment of conflict that had ended in tragedy. The realization that this was not an accident spread through the community like wildfire. Neighbors gathered, whispers passing from one person to another as rumors began to take shape. Questions arose immediately. How could something like this happen in a quiet town like Willow Creek? Who would want to harm Madison Clarke, a young woman admired by so many? The police secured the scene, collecting evidence, photographing the room, and carefully preserving every detail. Forensic specialists began their initial assessments, noting the absence of the phone and the signs of forced entry, however subtle. The more they examined, the more it became clear that Madison's death was intentional, calculated, and executed with a disturbing level of precision. It was a horrifying discovery that transformed what had begun as a peaceful morning into a nightmare that no one in Willow Creek would soon forget. Detectives began the painstaking process of piecing together the events that had led to Madison Clarke's death. Her room, though initially appearing orderly, yielded small but telling clues. A notebook tucked beneath her bed contained cryptic messages and sketches, some seemingly innocent, others hinting at stress and fear. Investigators also discovered her social media accounts had been unusually active in the days leading up to her death, with messages from unknown contacts and comments that raised suspicion. One message in particular stood out. A seemingly harmless note from a new follower who had recently begun engaging with her posts almost obsessively. It was friendly on the surface, yet a lingering unease permeated its tone. Detectives traced IP addresses and cross-checked locations, but the sender remained elusive, masked by layers of digital anonymity. As the investigation widened, the forensic team revealed a shocking detail. A toxicology report indicated the presence of a rare sedative in Madison's bloodstream. The concentration was enough to impair her coordination, making it clear she had been drugged before her death. This revelation shifted the investigation from a potential accidental drowning to a premeditated act. Detectives started questioning everyone close to her, beginning with her family and friends. Her parents described her as cautious and responsible, someone who would never place herself in danger voluntarily. Her friends were equally stunned, offering fragmented accounts of her last days. Patterns began to emerge, small but significant. Mentions of someone showing up unexpectedly at school, lingering in places Madison frequented, and leaving notes or gifts without revealing their identity. Surveillance footage from the night before the murder revealed Madison leaving her house, carrying nothing more than her backpack. For hours, she walked through familiar streets, passing by neighbors' homes and local shops. Cameras positioned along her route captured fleeting glimpses of figures in the shadows, though none were clearly identifiable. The images were grainy, leaving investigators frustrated. Each lead seemed to dissolve before it could be fully examined. Then, digital footprints began to surface. Madison had been searching for help online, looking up ways to handle unwanted attention and harassment. Some of her search history pointed to self-defense techniques, while other entries reflected confusion and fear. Detectives also discovered that Madison had confided in a few close friends about someone who had been making her uncomfortable. She hadn't named the person, but her friends described behavior that ranged from obsessive to controlling. Each account painted a picture of someone who had studied her routines, followed her movements, and attempted to insert themselves into her life. Combining this with the toxicology findings, investigators realized the murder had been carefully orchestrated, with the perpetrator manipulating circumstances to ensure Madison would be vulnerable. As the town grappled with the horrifying truth, the sense of safety that had defined Willow Creek began to erode. Residents questioned their neighbors, wondering if someone close could have committed such a crime. The police faced mounting pressure to identify the person responsible before more harm could occur. Every piece of evidence, no matter how small, became crucial. The discovery of the sedative, the mysterious messages, and the anonymous attention Madison had received painted a portrait of a calculated crime, one designed not only to harm, but to shock a community that had never imagined such darkness lurking among them. Each lead led to more questions than answers, intensifying the urgency of the investigation and the chilling realization that Madison Yes' death was no accident, but a deliberate act of violence meticulously executed by someone who knew her life intimately. The investigation into Madison Clarke's death deepened as detectives turned their focus to the people closest to her. Every friend, teammate, and family acquaintance came under scrutiny, their routines, alibis, and communications examined for inconsistencies. Her cheerleading coach was interviewed extensively, with attention given to past interactions, training schedules, and any disciplinary issues within the team. Teammates recounted odd behavior from one particular member, describing instances where Madison seemed tense or uneasy after private conversations. While nothing concrete had yet emerged, the collective pattern suggested that someone within her inner circle might have been watching her more closely than anyone realized. Meanwhile, investigators pursued the trail of Madison's online activity. Her phone, though missing from the scene, was partially recoverable through cloud backups. Text messages, deleted photos, and social media interactions painted a picture of a young woman whose life had become increasingly complicated by digital connections. One contact in particular stood out, a man in his late 20s who had been messaging her for weeks under the guise of mentorship and admiration. His messages were polite but insistent, offering guidance while subtly probing for personal information. Police discovered that he had a prior criminal history, including charges related to stalking and manipulation. Despite his age and past record, nothing directly linked him to the physical act of murder, but his obsession with Madison created a shadow over the investigation. Detectives also revisited the physical evidence from Madison's house. Forensic teams analyzed fingerprints, fibers, and trace materials, focusing on anything that could place an individual at the scene. They found a partial fingerprint on the bathroom faucet, smudged and incomplete, but it didn't match anyone in the family. Hair strands that didn't belong to Madison or her mother were recovered, though analysis would take weeks. Small details, once overlooked, now gained significance. The angle of the bathtub drain, water temperature, and signs of the sedative being introduced externally. Each new piece of information reinforced the chilling reality that the murderer had acted with precision, taking steps to ensure Madison would be unable to resist. As detectives pursued both digital and physical leads, they began to uncover the complexity of Madison's social life. Beneath the surface of cheerleading practices and school events lay secrets she had kept private. She had been meeting someone in person whom she trusted, someone who had positioned themselves as a confidant. Surveillance from local businesses and traffic cameras provided glimpses of her movements, revealing that she had been accompanied at times by a figure whose presence had previously gone unnoticed. The realization that this person had knowledge of her routines suggested premeditation and familiarity, deepening the sense of betrayal that would later emerge. Every day brought new frustrations as potential suspects were eliminated, and yet the case refused to yield a clear answer. Police began to suspect that Madison's killer was someone who had carefully cultivated trust, someone who could manipulate perceptions and leave minimal evidence. The combination of her digital interactions, the physical evidence, and testimony from her peers created a complex web that investigators struggled to untangle. The town remained on edge, knowing the perpetrator could be someone they had seen regularly, someone they had considered a friend. Each revelation added tension, and the detectives understood that the shocking truth might not be a stranger lurking in the shadows, but someone who had lived alongside Madison, watching and waiting until the perfect moment to strike. The breakthrough in the investigation came when digital forensics specialists recovered deleted messages from Madison Clarke's phone through a cloud backup. These messages revealed a chilling layer of deception. One message, time-stamped just hours before her death, indicated a meeting arranged with someone she trusted implicitly. The language was casual, even friendly, but beneath the surface was manipulation designed to ensure she would comply without suspicion. Detectives pored over the content repeatedly, realizing that the sender had an intimate understanding of her schedule, her habits, and her vulnerabilities. Every detail of Madison's day had been observed and exploited, suggesting that the person responsible was no stranger, but someone within her inner circle who had studied her life carefully. Investigators revisited her friends and teammates, this time with a more focused lens. Interviews revealed that Madison had confided in one close friend about feeling uneasy around certain people, although she had never named names. Small inconsistencies in this friend's recounting of events began to stand out. Minor details, once overlooked, now seemed calculated, such as being unusually vague about where she had been during certain hours or expressing knowledge of Madison's movements that she shouldn't have had. Detectives began to piece together a timeline, aligning her movements, the sedative in her system, and the messages recovered from her phone. The pattern pointed increasingly towards someone who had been manipulating Madison's trust for weeks, if not months. Forensic evidence strengthened the case. DNA traces recovered from Madison's bedroom and bathroom were matched against local databases and eventually to the close friend in question. Small fibers found on Madison's clothing corresponded to the friend's belongings. These details, combined with the phone messages, painted a disturbing portrait. The murder was meticulously planned, carried out by someone who had gained access to her life and used that knowledge to exploit a fatal vulnerability. Detectives realized that the friend had not only orchestrated the murder, but had also carefully constructed an alibi and manipulated the scene to suggest external involvement. The town's sense of security shattered as the realization dawned that the person they had welcomed into their homes and celebrated at school events was capable of such calculated violence. The motive behind the murder became clearer as investigators delved into the psychological dynamics between Madison and her friend. Jealousy and obsession appeared central to the crime. The friend had envied Madison's social standing, her athletic achievements, and the attention she received from peers and family. Over time, admiration had turned toxic, developing into resentment and a desire to control or eliminate what she could not have. Detectives found evidence of escalating behavior, harassment, secret surveillance, and attempts to isolate Madison from others. The bathtub murder, while horrifying, was the culmination of a series of manipulations that had built over time, culminating in a single devastating act. By the time the authorities confronted the friend, the web of deception had been meticulously documented. Each piece of evidence, from text messages to DNA to behavioral patterns, converged to leave no doubt about the perpetrator's identity. The betrayal was profound, not only because of the act itself, but because it came from someone Madison had trusted implicitly. Willow Creek, once a town defined by its quiet routines and community pride, now faced the stark reality that evil had existed among them, disguised behind smiles and familiarity. The revelation of the friend's culpability sent shockwaves through families, schools, and the broader community, leaving everyone grappling with the unsettling truth that those closest to us can sometimes harbor the darkest intentions. The trial of Madison Clarke's friend became one of the most closely followed events in Willow Creek's history. The courtroom was tense from the outset, filled with residents, classmates, and family members who had followed every twist of the investigation. Prosecutors presented a meticulous case, laying out the digital and forensic evidence in a sequence that left little room for doubt. Text messages recovered from Madison's phone demonstrated the careful manipulation leading up to the murder. DNA and fiber evidence linked the friend directly to the crime scene. Expert testimony described the sedative's effects on Madison and how it incapacitated her, ensuring the act could be carried out with chilling precision. Each piece of evidence revealed not only the premeditated nature of the crime, but also the cold calculation behind it. Defense attorneys attempted to cast doubt on the timeline, the reliability of digital evidence, and the forensic findings. They argued that the sedative could have been administered unknowingly and that the recovered messages were ambiguous, not proof of intent. They questioned the integrity of the DNA and fiber analysis, suggesting contamination or misinterpretation. Yet, every objection was met with careful counterarguments from the prosecution, who systematically reinforced the narrative of betrayal and premeditation. The jury listened closely as investigators recounted the painstaking process of reconstructing Madison's last hours, from her ordinary morning to the fatal bathtub incident. Each revelation left a deeper impression of the meticulous planning that had gone into the crime. Throughout the trial, the emotional weight was palpable. Witnesses described Madison as a vibrant, talented young woman whose life was full of promise. Her parents spoke about the void left by her death, the silent house, and the impossibility of understanding how someone they had trusted could commit such a heinous act. Friends and teammates recounted small signs they had missed, moments when they realized in hindsight that Madison had been under stress or anxious. Their testimonies highlighted the stark contrast between her cheerful exterior and the private fear she had experienced in her final days. The courtroom became a place not only of legal proceedings but also of communal grief and reckoning. As the trial neared its conclusion, the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated carefully, weighing each detail against the defenses presented. In the end, the verdict confirmed what the investigation had uncovered from the beginning. The friend was guilty of murder, manipulation, and calculated betrayal. Sentencing reflected the severity of the crime, emphasizing both premeditation and the deep breach of trust. The community responded with a mixture of relief, sorrow, and lingering disbelief. Justice had been served, but the emotional scars remained. In the weeks following the trial, Willow Creek began the slow process of healing. The tragedy left a permanent mark on families, schools, and the neighborhood, altering the way people viewed trust, friendship, and the seemingly ordinary relationships around them. Madison Clarke's story became a stark reminder that appearances can deceive and that even in quiet towns, danger can lurk close to home. The case also highlighted the power of meticulous investigation, digital forensics, and careful police work in uncovering the truth. While Madison's life had been cut tragically short, the truth of her final hours ensured that the perpetrator could not escape accountability, leaving a legacy of awareness, caution, and remembrance in a town forever changed by a shocking betrayal.